It is week 14 of the 2022 college football season, also known as Conference Championship Weekend. Now, I don't know about you, but I wish that there was a lot more intensity with this weekend. And I'm sure we're in for a good weekend. The last 2 weeks have been wild. The entire season has been wild. But just imagine what a 12-team playoff would look like this season. Especially with what, if I had to guess, the format would be. I don't know if this has been confirmed yet, but every Power 5 conference champion gets into the playoff. Just think if Purdue won this weekend, pulled off the upset against Michigan, Kansas State upset TCU, Utah beat USC, North Carolina beat Clemson. There would be teams that are on the edge, like Tennessee and Penn State. And I would even throw Oregon in there. They would be sweating it out on Selection Sunday. It would just add to the drama and intensity of the college football playoff selection process. But with it still being a 14 playoff, it is really simple. Georgia, I think, is in no matter what happens this weekend. I think Georgia can lose by 30 and they'd still get in. I think Michigan is in no matter what. I feel like Michigan can lose by 30 and they'd still be in. I don't know if TCU is safely in no matter what happens. I'd say TCU is maybe 90 to 95% safe. And for USC, I would imagine it would be win and you're in for USC. And the reason why I say imagine is because we don't know what the playoff ranking is going to look like until tomorrow night. And of course, this is a Monday. So this conference championship weekend, it feels simple. It kind of lacks intensity, but I still think we're in for a very fun weekend. A lot of dramatic moments can and probably will go down. But before we get to the predictions, I do have a couple of things to address. One, I will be hosting a Bowl Mania group once again this season. I will put the link in the description box down below. And we got to address the coaching carousel, as there has been a lot of coaching changes throughout the last 72 hours. The first one I'd like to talk about, Matt Rhule to Nebraska. Now, Matt Rhule was fired from the Carolina Panthers a little over a month ago, and now he will be taking over the Nebraska Cornhuskers, a historic blue blood program. Now, there are 3 things you like hearing if you're a Nebraska fan. Because after you hear these 3 things, if you're a Nebraska fan, you're absolutely pumped up about this hire, and you're excited and hopeful for what the future could be in store for this program. 1, there is a huge success rate of coaches that get fired in the NFL and go back down to the college game. Just a couple of examples. Pete Carroll, Jim Harbaugh, Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier. So that is a good sign that maybe better things are to come for this program. 2, Matt Rhule is already putting in the work. He is already getting to work by getting his coaching staff together. As the press conference was just this afternoon, but rumors have been circulating all weekend long, and even more rumors today. And 3, Matt Rhule is a master at rebuilding programs. He won everywhere he went to at the college level. He won at Temple. He rebuilt that program. He won at Baylor. He rebuilt that program. He got Baylor from out of the gutter in the Big 12 Conference. He took over Baylor at the worst time you can take over that program, as that was the time where Baylor was dealing with the essay allegations and the scandals. But he built that program up. And a big reason why Baylor is no longer in the gutter in the Big 12 is because of Matt Rhule. So I am looking forward to seeing what Matt Rhule does at Nebraska. As I'm not sure how many years it was at the top of my head, but I do know that it is $9 million a year. So I do predict that Matt Rhule does get out to a bit of a slow start for Nebraska, but they just got to be patient with Matt Rhule. They got to at least give Matt Rhule 6-7 seasons at Nebraska before they can make a move. Because the problem is for Nebraska lately is they're just going through head coaches every 4 or 5 seasons. And if you want to rebuild this historic blue blood program, you can't just keep changing coaches every 4 to 5 years. You got to have somebody in for the long haul. And this is a perfect fit for Nebraska. Whether or not Matt Rule was choice number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 7, this is a good fit. The next one, Luke Fickell to Wisconsin. Now, most years, there is at least one coaching hire that is completely shocking. And this season, Luke Fickell to Wisconsin is it. Now, I expected Luke Fickell to stay at Cincinnati for a little longer, especially with Cincinnati going to the Big 12 next season. Plus, I really thought that Luke Fickell was going to be that coach waiting in the wings at Ohio State for Ryan Day to go to the NFL. As one day I do think that happens. But Luke Fickell to Wisconsin. Now, based off of the reactions from some players on social media, they are not happy with this hire. As it appears that Jim Leonhard was promised to be named the permanent head coach, as he was named the interim coach. But Jim Leonhard is once again the Wisconsin defensive coordinator. And I honestly expect Jim Leonhard to leave Wisconsin, as there are a bunch of coaching jobs to fill. Georgia Tech, Colorado, Stanford, South Florida, Florida Atlantic, Texas State, Tulsa, Cincinnati, Western Michigan, UNLV, and Liberty. I would not be surprised if Jim Leonhard was a top priority for a team like Colorado or Stanford, Florida Atlantic, South Florida. I would not be shocked if Jim Leonhard was named the head coach at one of those places. If I'm Jim Leonhard, I know I was screwed over at Wisconsin, because it appears that Jim Leonhard was probably promised a coaching job, but then Luke Fickell rose to the occasion. So the big question is, how many Wisconsin players are going to transfer, and how many of the commits to Wisconsin next season are decommitting? And it's already getting started. But Luke Fickell's big task here is to get a quarterback in the transfer portal, because the quarterback has been the weak point for Wisconsin since Russell Wilson. So as far as an overall grade on this hire, I think it's an A- to an A. I'm wondering, like, the full fallout from the players is going to be, because so far they're not happy, it seems like. Even, I believe it was Eric Burrell that came out and said that firing Paul Chryst was going to be the biggest mistake that Wisconsin made. Or not hiring Jim Leonhard was going to be the easiest mistake that the program made. Whichever it was. I don't remember. But we'll see what happens in the next year or two. And now the latest big-time coaching hire, Hugh Freeze to Auburn. Now, I am skeptical about this one. Now, this comes days after it was announced that Lane Kiffin is expected to stay at Ole Miss, after it was rumored for weeks that Lane Kiffin is Auburn's top target. It was rumored that Lane Kiffin was expected to accept the Auburn job after the Egg Bowl. It was rumored that it was a done deal, and that after the Egg Bowl, Lane Kiffin would be at Auburn. All kinds of rumors. But now Hugh Freeze is the next Auburn coach. And I am a bit skeptical, because the last time Hugh Freeze was in the SEC, he was at Ole Miss. He has 2 wins over Alabama. I feel like this hire for Auburn, it was solely just to try to beat Alabama and to compete with them. So when he was at Ole Miss, he was getting good recruits, but unfortunately, recruiting scandals and violations surrounded him, as he did lose his job at Ole Miss, but then he went on to Liberty. He did win games at Liberty. We got to give him credit for that. And I'm a bit surprised, because he signed the extension weeks ago, which it does happen sometimes. You sign extensions and then a big-time job just falls into your lap. So I feel like 4 to 5 years from now, Auburn fans are going to be demanding the firing of Hugh Freeze, or he'll be one of the best coaches in the SEC. It's one of those two. I don't think it's anything in between. I don't see Hugh Freeze just being average. I think he'll either be one of the best or Auburn fans will be demanding a change. Utah and USC in the Pac-12 championship game. A lot on the line in this matchup. For Utah, a spot in the Rose Bowl, the opportunity to redeem themselves after last year's heartbreaking loss to Ohio State in the granddaddy of them all. And for USC, a spot in the college football playoff, because if USC wins this game, they will be in because their one loss of the year is to this Utah team, and if they win, that one loss gets null and void, so USC will be in a way undefeated and beat everybody they play. Now, for USC to win this game, they just have to make a few small tweaks to their game plan from the first time around. Because Utah got Dalton Kincaid involved in the matchup the first time, and he was a big reason why Utah came back late in that game to win on a game-winning two-point conversion. So if USC allows somebody else other than Kincaid to beat them, then there is a very strong chance for USC to win this game. In fact, I am going with USC to win this game. But the thing that does make me worried if you are a USC fan is Lincoln Riley does not tend to make second-half adjustments. But I think USC wins this game. They will clinch their spot in the college football playoff, and Caleb Williams will put on a Heisman-winning performance in this game, as I think Caleb Williams, with a win here, will secure the Heisman Trophy. North Carolina and Clemson. Now, these are two teams that had disappointing ends to their regular season. North Carolina, a 2-game losing streak after starting off their season 9-1. Clemson, a loss to South Carolina as they end their regular season 10-2. But there is a good consolation prize, and that is a spot in the New Year's Six. Now, Clemson, 10-2 may be a disappointing season to their standards, as they expect to be in the playoff just about every season. And they have not been in the playoffs now for 2 consecutive years. So I expect Clemson to come out and dominate this game. Now, Mack Brown may be experienced for North Carolina, but it has been a long time since he's been in a conference championship game. And Clemson, I think they will simply be the more prepared team in this matchup, more experienced team, I might add. And I'm going to go with the Tigers to win this matchup and lock their spot in for a New Year's Six bowl game. Purdue and Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. And go back to the Week 1 predictions video when I said that Purdue is either going to win the Big Ten West or they're going to be 6-6. And now Purdue is in the Big Ten championship game, and they get the Michigan Wolverines, who are coming off of a dominant win against Ohio State in the game, as that second half was complete Michigan domination. And Purdue, I don't think, has that much of a chance in this game. I am going with Michigan to absolutely dominate. Michigan has one of the best scoring defenses in the entire country. Blake Corum, 8th in the country in rushing yards, as he did not play that much in the Ohio State game. But I do think Corum plays in this game, and he absolutely dominates against this Purdue defense. So I am going with the Wolverines in this game, as Michigan, they are in no matter what. But they have got to get some confidence going into the college football playoff, as Michigan, they have dominated every team they've played against this season, with the exception of Illinois. And you could even argue Maryland, but they could have won that game by double digits, but Maryland scored really late in that game as Michigan's defense. They were kind of relaxed at that moment. So this is just going to be another dominant win for Michigan this season, as we look forward to seeing them in the college football playoff. Kansas State and TCU, Big 12 championship game. The first time these two teams met, Kansas State got out to a 28-10 lead. But then the further on the game went, TCU just became more and more dominant. Now, how does Kansas State pull off the upset the second time? Well, it starts off with Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn has been a key to Kansas State pulling off upsets throughout his entire career. Now, TCU's defense has been weak throughout the majority of the year. But this just feels like a game where TCU is going to find a way to win, and they'll win the very end. Will Howard looked good in the first matchup, but then he had to leave the game due to injury temporarily, and Kansas State was down to their third-string quarterback at one point in that game. Then Will Howard came back, was too little too late. The Horned Frogs already had that game wrapped up. So if Will Howard can stay healthy this time, I think there is a strong chance that Kansas State can pull off the upset. But as said a moment ago, this just feels like I'm getting the vibes of TCU finding a way to win as they have multiple times throughout the year. So I am going with the Horned Frogs to win and clinch their spot in the college football playoff. At least officially clinch their spot, as I do think that TCU at this point, I think they are only about 90 to 95% safe. But with this win, they will 100% be in the playoff. LSU and Georgia in the SEC championship game. Georgia is in the college football playoff no matter what happens here, but they still have to get the number one seats. They can get their choice of venue for the semifinals. So how does LSU stay in this game? They got to take a page out of Missouri's playbook. Missouri, they held their own against Georgia throughout the majority of the game. I'd say about 53 to 60 minutes in that game, they were outplaying Georgia. And Missouri was able to do that by extending drives, getting into short yardage situations, taking their time, keeping Georgia's offense on the sidelines. As Georgia's offense, they are efficient. They may take their time on offense, as they are a top 10 team in time of possession, but they do capitalize and score points. But we don't talk about Georgia's offense that much compared to their defense. Despite their defense not being elite like last season, it's still an elite defense this season, as they are probably the best defense in college football. Maybe not statistically in all forms, but I'd say they're the best defense. Jaden Daniels got banged up last week against A&M. Harold Perkins got banged up last week. So their big pieces to have a chance of pulling off the upset are banged up heading into this matchup. And to tell you the truth, LSU, ever since they beat Alabama, they have not looked impressive to me. Ever since they beat Alabama, a 13-10 win against Arkansas, their defense saved them that game. A slow start against UAB. They still got the win, but still UAB. A beatdown by Texas A&M on the road. Devon Achane had 215 rushing yards in that game. So I think Georgia is going to absolutely obliterate LSU in this game. I don't think LSU has any chance, maybe a slight chance, and it's the fact that college football has been insane this season, with a lot of upsets this year, especially in the last couple of weeks. That is their glimmer of hope in this one. So before I wrap things up, I do want to predict the rest of the conference championship games, as I do want to acknowledge a group of 5 championship games. So starting things off with Conference USA, North Texas, and UTSA. I'm going with UTSA. The MAC championship, Toledo and Ohio. Despite carousel work being out for the season, I still am going with Ohio in this game. And for all of you gamblers out there, every time Ohio has won this season, they have also covered. They're a 1.5 point underdog, so take that information as you wish, whether it's with a grain of salt or seriously. Sun Belt Conference Championship, Coastal Carolina and Troy. Coastal Carolina has been without Grace McCall for the majority of the year, while Troy, they are a very underrated and not talked about 10-2 team. Their 2 losses are to Ole Miss in Week 1 and to App State. And the loss to App State was on a Hail Mary play. So Troy, they're a Hail Mary away from being 11-1. So I am going with Troy, as Troy's scoring defense is 8th in the FBS. Mountain West Championship, Fresno State and Boise State. Now these are 2 teams that got off to a slow start this season, but they are on hot streaks. But I am going with Boise State, as they did beat Fresno State by 20 earlier in the year. I do think this game is a lot closer, but I still think Boise State comes out on top. American Athletic Conference Championship, UCF and Tulane. A spot in the New Year's Six on the line in this game. There has been some rumors that Tulane's head coach is in talks of being the next head coach at Georgia Tech. But UCF, they beat them a couple weeks ago. So I am going with UCF in this matchup. And that will do it for my Conference Championship Weekend predictions. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, have a great day and enjoy the college football this weekend.